Good morning. The reading today comes from Paul's letter to the Galatians, chapter 4, verses 8 to 20. Paul's concern for the Galatians. Formerly, when you did not know God, you were slaves to those who by nature are not God. But now that you know God, or rather are known by God, how is it that you are turning back to those weak and miserable forces? Do you wish to be enslaved by them all over again? You are observing special days and months and seasons and years. I fear for you that somehow I've wasted my efforts on you. I plead with you, brothers and sisters, become like me, for I became like you. You did me no wrong. As you know, it was because of an illness that I first preached the gospel to you. And even though my illness was a trial to you, you did not treat me with contempt or scorn. Instead, you welcomed me as if I were an angel of God, as if I were Christ Jesus himself. Where then is your blessing of me now? I can testify that if you could have done so, you would have torn out your eyes and given them to me. Have I now become your enemy by telling you the truth? Those people who are zealous to win you over, but for no good. What they want us to do is alienate you from us, so that you may have zeal for them. It is fine to be zealous, provided that the purpose is good, and to be so always, not just when I am with you. My dear children, for whom I am again in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you, how I wish I could be with you now and change my tone, because I am perplexed about you. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ.
Well, good morning. It's lovely to be with you this morning again. If you're visiting, or this is your first time here at Immanuel, my name's Paul. I'm one of the ministers here at the church. It's great to have you with us. Thank you for joining us. You probably would have worked out we're doing a series on the book of Galatians at the moment, and we're journeying through it. We're not long to go. It's timed nicely to arrive just in time for the dreaded C word. At the end of the book, we lead nicely into the weeks before Christmas. Now, he's not here today, so we can talk about him. That's how it works. No, Jordan is our lovely new youth leader. He's got a week. He had an event booked this weekend when he came to start working with us, and he said, "Can I go to it?" I said, "Of course you can go to it. Goodness me, we're honouring the things that you've got. Go, be blessed." But I've got to know him over these coming weeks and the weeks since he started. And he shared quite early on that him and his lovely girlfriend really enjoy watching Saving Lives at Sea. I know that there'll be a few woohoos because I do know that in particular Martin is a keen supporter of the RNLI and does a lot of work with them and for them. And clearly being a city that's so close to the coast, the RNLI is very much on our radar. We appreciate the work, whether you're down at the Witterings and you see the lifeguards at the Witterings. I don't think they're officially RNLI. They're not officially RNLI ones, but nonetheless, we appreciate the work that the RNLI does with saving lives at sea. And I have seen a few episodes of the Saving Lives at Sea, and it always impresses me, because I really can't stand boats. And so, anyone that goes into one and then out into storms gets a degree of respect from me over and above the normal level of bravery, because I hugely admire people that do this. When they see people in distress or whatever, and sometimes you look at it and you're thinking, my word, if I got the call to that, I'd go, no, they're there because they're just stupid. I'm not going to risk my life for the case of stupid people. But maybe that says something more about me than them. And others, they generally, life has unfortunately dealt them a bad hand on the sea at the time, and they need someone to go and rescue them. And these people just go, drop what they what they're doing, get to the lifeboats and shoot off into the sea, into all weather conditions to go and rescue these people. And I hope, I suspect I probably haven't, that I would have the same level of bravery if I was ever put into that situation. I wonder how you would respond if you were put into those situations. You may be one of those people that look at the sea and are quite fearful of it because you can't swim, and therefore it is a particularly great threat to you. You might look at it and you may look like Jordan does and look at and just think it's a great source of enjoyment and recreation. However, whatever your attitude to it, the forces of nature can be overwhelming, whether it's a source of recreation or fear to start with. The Bible records Jesus as saying this, though, and you might wonder why I'm connecting these two passages. Bear with me. In Matthew's Gospel, Jesus is recorded as saying, "Do not be afraid of those who can kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell." So how brave are we at going after the ones who are in need of a rescue? You see, Paul in this passage, I don't know whether you saw it, Paul is writing and is reflecting about the situation that he finds the church in Galatia in at the time. What a very brief synopsis is: he set up the church, who were going really well, and then, as that lovely sketch showed, a group of Jewish believers came from Jerusalem to be with the church in Galatia. They started bringing Jewish culture and insisted on Jewish culture into the context, and started to bring in issues around circumcision and Jewish laws into the church, and started to say, no, you must do this to be a follower of Jesus. And this is Paul's response to that situation, saying, no, that's not the case. You were born to be free, not born to be followers of these religious practices. So he's writing into this context, but he says, and it's interesting that he very briefly skips through it, and I want to pick up on it at the start of this talk today. Firstly, have you ever heard the expression, when the life gives you lemons, make lemonade? That's what Paul did here. Did you notice that? Why did Paul get to speak to the church in Galatia in the first place? Because he was ill. It was not his plan. Life dealt him a lemon, so he thought, I'm going to make lemonade. This is an opportunity. I am ill. They are looking after me. They're looking after me. What am I going to give them? I'm going to give them the gospel. I'm going to tell them the good news. I'm going to tell them what they really need to hear. Life may be giving me lemons. The enemy may be throwing things at me, but I'm going to throw things back. I'm going to fight back, and the way I'm going to fight back is by sharing the good news of what I believe to be true about Jesus. And so this church in Galatia is born out of a lemon that Paul is handed at the time. He is ill, and they are looking after him. So while they're caring for him, he uses an opportunity and goes, guys, ladies, let me tell you a story about what I believe to be true. There's this man called Jesus, and he's God. And he's come to set you free from the things that really bind you in life. And he shares these good news. They all come to faith. But he also said, I became like you. Did you hear that? I became like you. Paul was a master at this. He was a master at taking the gospel, taking the good news, and making it relevant to the culture and the customs of the time. We see that in the book of Acts. through the writings of Acts, as Paul is engaging with people, he looks around, sees situations and said, how can I take this good news and make it relevant into that context? Because whatever happens, the good news is flexible and adaptable with everything except the good news. So the method of delivery is entirely flexible and adaptable. The good news remains the good news. The good news stays constant. It stays consistent. But the way that you communicate it is completely flexible and adaptable. Tim Keller writes this, that the gospel is not specific to culture or custom. In explaining what he means, it's flexible and adaptable. It's supposed to be. The way that you word it, Paul was a master at this. He says, I became like you. I looked around and saw the church in Galatia, saw the people of Galatia and said, how do I communicate this into that context? How is it that I can make this relevant to them, but keep the integrity of what I'm talking about? And church, this is so key to what we have been called to. We look at the New Testament and we think, oh, well, it was so much easier in those days. Why? That's not true. They were under persecution. They were a persecuted group at the time from Rome, from the Jewish population as well as the Roman population. It was not an easy time for them. But they had an ability to say, well, this is the good news, and it's good news. The good news is good news because it's good news. Always good news, and people need to hear it. Why? Why do people need to hear it? Let's go back to what Jesus said. He said this, do not be afraid of those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. That's why it's good news. And Paul knew this. He believed that statement of Jesus to be true. And so went out and goes, right, they need to hear it. I'm telling them. So church, how are we at that? The church behaves more often like a cruise liner, but it was never designed to be comfortable. And more often than not, I think if you look at the church today, you go, yeah, it's a lovely cruise liner. But you look on the side and you'll realize it's got SS Titanic written on it. It was designed to be a lifeboat. It was designed to be a lifeboat, one that went out into the world that it was planted into with the good news of Jesus. Which is why, as a church, we have one of our key parts of our vision, one of our straplines is we want to be a church that attracts others because we think Jesus is naturally attractive. Not physically. The Bible says actually that's not true. But his message, his good news is an attractive statement. It was 2,000 years ago and it remains attractive now. There's some fascinating pieces of research. If you haven't read it, there's some books at the back. Go away and take them. The Talking Jesus research, the recent stuff that's come out, has been fascinating. It's really interesting. It's just not true that people are not interested in Jesus. That there is no evidence to suggest that's true. The church believes it to be true because the devil plants that in our heads and tells us they're not interested in what you believe. Well, the evidence suggests that that's just not true. Did I share this last week? I might have done. I've talked about this with some people this week. I can remember that. But what's really interesting that it's based on relationship. When non-Christians look at friends that they know who are Christians, they hold them in great high esteem. They look at them and they appreciate certain values that they hold, and they admire that. What's different is when they look at the church. They don't look at the church in the same way at all. The church has a very negative set of values associated with it. But that's not the case for Christians that they know. So what that proves is relationships are so important because the church does not have a good rep, but Christians do. So when your non-Christian friends look at you, hopefully they look at you and go, actually, I do like them. They seem to be and have very positive attributes about them. But when they look at the church, when we gather together, for some reason, they don't have the same positive viewpoint on us. So that tells us that actually there is a harvest out there. Why were we surprised at that? Because Jesus tells us that right back. 2,000 years ago, Jesus told the church that the harvest is out there. So just pray to the Lord to send harvesters into the field. And guess what? He's lined you up. He's raised you up, lined you up, equipped you, and said, right, go out, harvest. But we need to learn what it means to be like Paul, to keep the good news, but to become relevant to the society, but not change the message. We need that incarnational presence of the church. At Immanuel, we must always focus on our relationships, both internally and externally, but also the relationship we have with God, because the latter drives the former. Our relationship we have with God drives the relationships that we have with other people within the church and with outside the church. It's that pushes us out and says that God is great. God is so much better than you ever imagined him to be. He loves you. He wants a relationship with you. He's done so much for you. You've just got to get to know him. You see, religion, I love this quote. It came from Mark Batson. I saw it on Twitter yesterday. I thought, I'm putting that in my sermon. Religion says do. Whereas Jesus says done. Religion says do. It's about you must do this. You must do that. And do you know what? We all subscribe to it. We all follow that because it makes sense. Doesn't it? It does. The church buys into this because it seems to be a logical thing. If there's God, he'd want you to do certain things. Whereas Jesus says it's done. Just relax. Relax in the knowledge that it's been done for you. Last week, we went away for 5 days on holiday as a family. We were following our sat-nav, and it did get us to our direction. I've learned one thing. Never trust Apple Maps as much as the car sat-nav. Apple Maps seem to like taking you down very small country lanes. The car sat-nav does not like that. So on the way there, we went by Apple. On the way back, we came back by Citroen. Now, I could have decided to listen to the other voices. So maybe my inner sense of direction, which is actually not that bad. I could have decided to listen to the other voices in the car, of which there were at least 5. But that's not the voice of experience. Okay, Siri may be an AI, an artificial intelligence, but I tend to trust her, mine's a her, more than I trust the other voices in the car. Because I sort of know that she's probably talking sense. When it comes to directions, that is, because she's got a map. These do not have an inbuilt map in their head. They don't. I don't. None of us do we? Some of us do. You have an inbuilt map in your head that tells you where roadworks are and traffic jams and things like that. Okay. But Paul is writing into that context and says, look, he's sort of suggesting that. He said, why are you listening to the other voices? Why are you listening to those other voices? Those ones that are calling you back to do something that we called you out of. Why are you listening to them? Because you're going back into the realms of do's, not done's. The problem when you're looking at Galatians, you really want to get to the punchline. And it's so obvious where we're going on this, but I don't want to ruin the talks that are lined up for the weeks to come. And I don't know if it's me that's got them or whether it's one of the other people that are preaching, but we're going to get to chapter 5, and I don't want to ruin the whole story of chapter 5. But Paul is saying, you stop going back. And he calls us, Paul is reminding us that this is a relationship of desires and not of compulsions. And I think that's really important. This is a relationship of desires. We desire to do what's right. We're not compelled to do it. And there is a difference. One is law, one is relationship. And are you living in that place? I know that I am. We all find ourselves in that place at times because I come back to the point I originally made, it makes logical sense. So that clock is really unhelpful because it's not just an hour out, it's completely wrong. Okay. So, do we as a church want to grow? That's a rhetorical question to some extent. I'm hoping it's a rhetorical question, because if the answer is no, can I really politely suggest you either rethink that answer or maybe go and find another worshiping community? Because, Immanuel, we really want to grow, because that's Jesus' heart for his church. Jesus said, look, don't worry, I will build my church. You just have to be faithful disciples. So as long as we're faithful disciples, the rest is up to Jesus. He said, I'll grow my church. I will build it. So do we want to grow as a church? Yes, because we want to be faithful disciples of his. Do we want to see life set free in the power of Jesus? Well, again, I hope the answer is yes. Because Paul challenges us in this. It's hidden so smallly. To use the opportunities that we have to be incarnationally present disciples of Jesus, to bear the good news into those contexts. You know, I became like you when the world threw me a lemon. I made lemonade. I became like you and made lemonade. I got sick. You looked after me. So I learned a little bit about you, and then I told you the good news into your context. You believed. That's the thing that set you free, not what was going on in Jerusalem. That was the thing that set you free. This ultimately is what's driving the leadership of this church. And so the question remains, are you with us, the leadership of Immanuel, to be a church that grows, incarnationally present in the context that Jesus has planted us into? Should we stand?